Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Maybe you're listening to this on your way home from work, but welcome to the International Code Council, ICC Region 1 and Region 1 radio show. My name is Tim Spears. I am the fire marshal for South San Joaquin County Fire Authority, but also the treasurer for Region 1 and the host of Region 1 Radio. Region 1 was established in 2014, and we're made up of 3 states, California, Hawaii, and Nevada. That includes 32 ICC chapters. We're dedicated to excellence in education and engagement to promote a safer environment by bringing code professionals together. These videos and podcasts were a series designed to highlight individuals and chapters that make up the region and share their experiences. Today, I'm excited because I have joining me Chief Michael O'Brien, Fire Chief with the Brighton Area Fire Authority in Brighton, Michigan. Chief O'Brien is also the chair of the ICC Fire Code Action Committee and the International Director of Fire and Life Safety Section for the International Fire Chiefs Association, and he is a candidate for the second vice president with the International Association of Fire Chiefs. Chief O'Brien was also the recent recipient of the Robert W. Gaine Fire Prevention Leadership Award. This award is presented annually to recognize those with career achievement by an individual who has demonstrated exceptional leadership and longstanding dedication and support in fire codes and fire prevention. Chief O'Brien, welcome, and welcome to Region Radio.
Hey, Tim, thanks for having me. It's pretty cool to connect with you. I got to upgrade my mic game like you. And for those in podcast land, we got matching blue shirts on today. So it's good for our YouTube fans to see.
Yeah, we're wearing team colors today. So if you're watching this now, you can actually watch this video on Spotify as well. So we're kind of like the Joe Rogan of building and fire code podcasting now. So you can watch this. I don't have any ads to sponsor, but so you're just going to get us for the next for foreseeable future.
That's
everybody.
Right.
So just FYI. How are things in Michigan today?
It's beautiful. We had seasonably warm weather yesterday. We've had high winds on and off what seems like for 2 weeks, but we're back into Michigan weather. 30. I think it's time for some snow. I'm not in the big snow belt where I'm at. I'm outside Detroit, but it's time for snow. Let's cover up the ground. I'm tired of looking at leaves.
I was going to say it's probably pretty brown. I grew up in the Midwest just outside of Omaha, and this time of year, it's like you're just waiting for the snow because everything is all dormant, right? The leaves are gone off the trees, grass is dormant. You got to cover it up because it just makes it look nicer.
That's right. Get the snow on the ground, and kids can go play skiing, all that winter stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys have a big skiing area in Michigan? I would imagine so, right? You've got probably some decent hills and things like that.
There's a difference in our skiing here in Michigan. So outside Detroit, we have these little snow hills. We have Mount Brighton, which is not a mountain. It's some overfilled dirt from the freeway. And so Mount Brighton got picked up by Vail maybe 6-7 years ago to help kind of feed the big Vail. And they've improved the snow conditions. A lot of snowboarding, it's 10 seconds down and 3 minutes up type stuff. But when you get up north, Traverse City, Petoskey, they got some beautiful areas up there. It's still not like the big mountains, but it's fun to get outside in the winter. A lot of cross-country skiing takes place. We got a lot of park space here. So we do see a lot of that. And, you're actually starting to see more snowshoeing and stuff like that too.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention, Chief O'Brien is also the owner of Kensington Valley CrossFit. So very avid and very physically fit fire chief. And so snowshoeing probably, I don't know, have you done a lot of snowshoeing up in the backwoods up there?
No, only a couple times. I still brave myself outside to go do some running in the slush and snow. Ugh. Yeah, it's we don't do much at the gym this time of year because you just track too much inside, but lots of rowing and ski erg and all those fun things.
I'll be honest. So I do a lot in my garage, and I'm kind of a wimp. So when it turns about 40 degrees, I don't have a heater out there, and it's a detached garage. So I'm out there, 5:30 in the morning and trying to work out. And so if it's too cold, I'll get on the Peloton and I'll ride that a bit. Hey, at least fitness is still achieved at that point. But yeah,
that's the key. Yeah.
Question: do you have a heater in your CrossFit box? Because I know we don't out here. It's cold.
Okay. No, we are. So we have about, we're just over 6,000 square feet. There is heaters, and our air conditioning usually is open the garage doors to let the air in. A couple of the days it was a little unbearable. During some of the COVID restrictions, we were outside working out on blacktop, which was not a lot of fun. But, overall, we keep it about 60 degrees, which when you walk in, it's cold. Right. In the barbells, the pull-up rig has a little bit of a chill, but over time, as you kind of, it doesn't take more than about 5 minutes of a warm up, and you're getting rid of layers.
Yep. Yeah. I always make it my goal whenever I teach a class is to try to help people start to shed their layers a bit. As long as they're starting to sweat and shed their layers, then I know I'm doing my job as a coach. So
that's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. And hopefully nobody left us during our little caveat on to CrossFit, because, well, that's a passion, I'm sure, of both of ours and fitness as well. But can you describe the fire authority, the demographics, and the region that you serve?
Sure. Yeah. Brighton Area Fire Authority was the combination of two departments in the late 90s that merged together for fire services. So we're kind of an independent authority. I know in California, you guys have quite a few. We were one of the first here in Michigan at that point in time. So we cover 2 townships in a city about 74 square miles. We are suburbia, 2 Home Depots, 2 Lowe's, your typical big box, not much over 4 stories right now. At some point, Brighton was that area that was the fastest growing in the state of Michigan. We've traded with some other cities here and there just as some of our demographic is filling up. The interesting part is I think we have about 7 water authorities. So water isn't a big issue, but where we're at, we're just outside of the Detroit waterway system. So it actually is in the town to our east. And so Detroit water comes out of the Detroit River, which is, for people who aren't familiar with the Great Lakes, right? A lot of fresh water comes that way. So one of our biggest challenges is always water and how we get fire protection. So we're pretty rural, suburban. I would put us, for the most part, 5 stations. I think we're dealing with a lot that most people are. So we're increasing our on full-time staffing, on-duty staffing on a regular basis. We just completed in the fall renovation about $4 million on one of our fire stations, and then we broke ground about a month ago on a replacement station, and really needed. Most of our stations were made for paid on call. Right, there was room for fire trucks, and then like 2 bathrooms and a kitchenette. And it's not really for on-duty quarters. So we run about 2 academies a year. So we have kind of pioneered out here what's called a high school fire academy. We're in the 9th year, where if you're a junior or senior in any of our high schools, you can attend our fire academy. And in a perfect world, you go to our fire academy and then you go to your EMT your senior year. You graduate at 18, firefighter 2, EMT. The only thing left is to go get that magic paramedic. So we're now housing that. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, we've got, we stay relatively busy. Our run volume's about 22% up this year. Over last year, we're definitely over our 19 numbers, and just, it's kind of one of those growing things. Our inspectors and fire marshal are staying actually relatively busy with a lot of new construction and renovation. I mean, we're seeing capital improvements like, it's been a long time since we've seen this much.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now, kind of going back to that discussion about your fire academy through the high schools, have you, as they go to paramedic school, are you then bringing, because we're seeing, I don't know here if you're seeing the same thing in the state of Michigan, but in California, if you want to become a firefighter, I mean, we have so many job openings right now that I've never seen this in my career. Normally, I tested, and when I first tested to be on a fire department, I remember it was for Omaha City, or the city of Omaha, and I took a test with like 3,000 people, and they had like the written test over 3 days. And now it's, I mean, you're still getting a lot of people, but they're, they'll apply, but then they're getting pulled to other they're getting pulled to other departments. And so have you seen, some of those people graduate that academy and come into your fire department?
So we will get quite a few as paid on call. We've got a couple working towards their full-time stuff. I think they're over 10 are somewhere in Michigan's fire service employed full-time. Okay. And that's really been our goal all along is how do we, I mean, I shouldn't say all along, but A, we wanted more firefighters for our county. And then number two, how do we just help the fire service as a whole? Because even 10 years ago, we were starting to see this pretty major decline as we went into National Registry Paramedicine, and we just can't keep up with the demand. And there is some serious horse trading going on. We're not a statewide pension here in the state, so it's very hard for people to laterally move from one department to another one. But, we also had a lot of changes in retiree benefit structures over the years. So a lot of communities dropped their pensions. They dropped their firefighter retiree health care, which made things very, very difficult for us to retain and attract people. But the competition is fierce for one firefighter paramedic. We have departments offering $10,000 signing bonuses. The base pays are going up. One fire department just started a beautiful one that for years 2, 3, 4, right, how you might have a step up. They are honoring your time at another department to get you in the door at a higher pay rate. And so really good for the labor market, really bad. As fire chiefs, we're struggling. Lists are going quick. Fire chiefs are almost always looking. They're dropping standards even. And what I mean by that is so it used to be you better be Fire 2 paramedic. Now they're willing to drop it and say, hey, look, Fire 2 EMT in a paramedic program, and we'll help supplement. And so that's what you're seeing more and more of. But, we're on the crux of all of us just trying to figure out how do we make more paramedics? How do we make more firefighters? Because it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think that we're kind of in that same boat. So we just had a fire cat. Well, actually, we've had 2 over this past year to be able to fill just vacancies, through attrition. And the first academy was for paramedics, but we couldn't get enough paramedics to fill those positions. So then you have to open it up to more individuals. And not to say that they weren't qualified, but just to find paramedics, it's just been extremely difficult. I mean, everybody, I don't want to say everybody, a lot of fire agencies now are going to that ALS model, and you need paramedics to be able to supply that.
Yeah. And I think that's our hope, right? In the academy, man, I got to grab them before they go to construction school, doctor school, they fall in love with whatever it is. And we've seen some good success with some really good men and women coming through that program. And there's nothing cooler when you see a sub 21-year-old getting hired full-time somewhere. That's unbelievable.
Yep. Yeah, I can't agree with you more. Now, one of the things that I've been thinking about, because I know that right now, especially in the fire inspection and building inspection industry, we're kind of an aging group, right? And so you're not getting as many new individuals coming into this profession. So I know ICC has established a program where they're working on trying to help people, kind of very similar to that program. At least get one ICC certification. I think it's the residential inspector certification. And that's kind of one of those things I want to try at my local high school is try to get more folks to, maybe pursue a career in fire prevention and fire inspection, because I actually, unfortunately, when I began my career, I actually began it as a cop. I worked for the Iowa State Fire Marshal's office for a bit, and I was a cop. I was a fire marshal, but I was not necessarily in the fire service as a fire marshal. And so, but I've always kind of been through this, profession in that regard. And so, definitely, I have a different perspective than maybe that somebody that's been on a fire engine for many, many years coming into the profession. So, but I'd like to be able to try to train those individuals, try to train them up to be able to fill some of these vacancies. Because right now, I know that when I interview folks to, come into my department, we don't get a lot of applications with a lot of experience. So,
well, and so we see a lot of people they don't want to leave the magical 24-hour shift.
Yeah.
And so, especially in the crossovers, we see that. But one of the things I think we're all trying to do is just how do we expose the profession? The state of Michigan, to get into building inspection, you actually have to swing a hammer for 4 years full time.
Oh, wow.
or you got to go get your architect engineer. And so just some of the discussion we've had is with some of these building trade schools too as well, right? There's certain things I think that we would love our builders to be exposed to.
Hmm.
Let's just talk about good smoke alarm placement or how automatic sprinkler systems go in, just some of those things that I think we're all trying to get better built environment. And we hope it gives them an exposure that maybe somewhere down the road, they're like, you know, putting a roof on a house when it's 20 degrees outside is a little rough. And
Right.
we need people with that experience to come work, especially on the building side, but
Hmm.
even within the fire side. In Michigan, we're typically our fire inspectors come from fire operations.
Hmm.
That's 95%. Once in a while, we'll see some civilians, what we'll call
Hmm.
civilians hired. But I think you're right. I think all of us are just sitting here trying to, how do we open up this really cool profession
Yeah.
to more people? Because it's been extremely rewarding for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll be honest, uh, I didn't even know anything more, about the fire service other than, putting the wet stuff on the red stuff. Not so much about like fire codes, the fire marshal. Yeah. I watched Jim Carrey's, fire marshal Bill character on Living Color, but that's really all I really knew about what a fire marshal or fire code enforcement really truly was. And that was not a very good indication of what we truly do. I mean, it's a very good parody of what we do, but, and so, yeah, like you said, how do you open it up? How do you really introduce more people to the profession and engage? And that's kind of one of those areas that I've been trying to figure out more and more. I mean, social media has its place, but I will say that conversations like this and posting them on YouTube, and hopefully, they stumble across it on a podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever. As long as they're finding it and listening, maybe attract more people, especially maybe somebody that's in college right now trying to figure out a profession, like you just mentioned too. Those that might be working outside and sub-zero temperatures, and saying, hey, this has been fun, but I think I'm going to use this experience to maybe look on the other side, the flip side of the coin, in a sense.
I think a lot of times too, we just got to ask somebody, right? Hey,
Hmm.
have you ever thought of, and right, we're dealing with a
Right.
good maybe general contractor or a fire protection person, and we say, hey, have you ever thought, here's the career path? And
Hmm.
because I think in some people's mind it's unattainable, right? Like
Right.
we have this magical knowledge base, but yeah, I think that's a great point, is just how do we keep that dialogue open for all of
Hmm.
us? Because the number of building permits are going up here, number of
Yeah.
everything, and so that demand is increasing more and more.
Yeah, and like you said, number of building permits are going up. Here in our jurisdiction, I think that building actually increased during the pandemic because we're just over the hill from the Bay Area. So I know that there were some different regulations over there. So I think it attracted more building to our area. And so it has not slowed down. We're right now, we're actually in the process of building I want to say it's a 5-story, almost 4 million square foot storage facility for a large e-commerce vendor, and it's all performance-based design, and trying to figure that out, and just the number of inspections and all of those things associated with it, and it's ongoing, right? And we're becoming quite the logistics hub, and so we're building million square foot warehouses. It seems like as they finish one, they start another one, and we're ever growing, and there's even plans now to build another 30 million square foot of warehousing space that is at the county level right now. So yeah, I'm going to definitely be in desperate need of some more help as time goes on. So
People look at lines and dots and everything else
yep.
too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So we all take different paths throughout our profession, throughout our career. Can you provide any or describe any notable experiences that really have shaped your perspective in fire code enforcement?
Oh man, that's a good question. So it all started for me. I was a full-time firefighter. I was the third person hired by this fire department. I was paid on call there first, and the fire marshal quit, and they offered me a small percentage increase to be the fire marshal because I had some knowledge in swinging a hammer and knew how to read prints. I had no clue what I was doing. We were amongst a building boom in the town, and so I did what most good people should do, I found somebody who was really good at it. I went and talked to him. And so I got some really good guidance by the fire marshal in the town next door, in what's called the city of Novi at the time. And so it was really a good thing because I learned immensely how to be an inspector, what I was supposed. I didn't even know what an NFPA was, short of what they told me in the fire academy. And then my bosses pointed to these 12 black books and said the answer's in there. Go find it. They didn't know. So the funny part is Mike, the guy I went and met with, is now my deputy chief after he retired out of that town. Okay. So everything comes full circle. So that's kind of how it started. I've done a lot of consulting across the country, predominantly here in Michigan, but all over the place, that have allowed me to see some really cool things. And I always joke, nobody calls you when something's easy. They want you to come look at something difficult, which has been fun. But, you know, probably one of the more notable things in my career, I was working for Rich Marinucci in the city of Farmington Hills. And Rich is a past president of the IFC, longtime fire chief. But he had started in prevention, and we were doing a lot of training. We did company inspections, so our companies would go out and do inspections. And, you know, we were just trying to get through. But what we decided was we weren't the only ones who needed more training for our prevention folks. And how do we take this very complex thing like NFPA Inspector 1 and just teach people the basics, right? So we spent hours together just going through, and I hate to go this basic, but, you know, what's the intent of a fire inspection in an occupied building, right? Is we want to prevent the fire. So, right, when you walk around, you're looking for things that might be obvious that could start fires, right? So if you have processes, you add to it, right? And we just built from there. Okay, now if a fire does start, what do we want? Well, we want early detection. Okay, if the building doesn't have detection, then what is the answer? Okay, then we want the sprinklers to work. Are the valves open? Has it been serviced, right? And I have always remembered the work we did during that time, because it's so funny how no matter where I'm at, we seem to go back to those basics, right? If there's a fire, we want it to stay small. Well, how do you keep it small? Well, if there's no sprinklers, there's no alarms, then we probably have some kind of separations. Okay, so do the doors work? Are they closable? Have they been serviced? Are the walls? Are there penetrations, right? And so I think that that's probably one of the most memorable parts of my career, was kind of building that and how we spread it, because I hope we made a big difference, because a lot of people attended those programs over time. Yeah.
You know, I think that's a great idea. You know, like you just said, like, how do we either, you know, one, be able to keep it small? How, really, it kind of goes all the way back to the, and this, I use this example during some training with my staff this week, and they all kind of rolled their eyes when I said it, but it was like, just think about the fire triangle. You know, all you're trying to do is, you know, you're going to have oxygen, right? It's in the air. You're not going to do anything with it. So how are you going to keep the stuff that burns away from the heat source? You got to think that's where you kind of need to boil it down to that. And they're, because we were covering like chapters 3 and 4 in the fire code, and I said, if you look at chapter 3, that's what it's really all about. You know, how do you just keep things apart, and or you know, keep it so that way it doesn't grow very big? And so they just kind of like, oh yeah, we get it. You know, thanks for the reminder. So.
Well, and you bring up chapter 4, but you look at this terrible mess that just happened across Kentucky and Illinois out of these tornadoes, right? And one of the things being cited is training of employees in some of these buildings in the disaster. I mean, Oxford, the shooting is maybe 30 minutes from here. And so I've had so many peers just dealing, and in training made such a huge difference in there. And I think, right, that's part of what the fire code is trying to do, is that there's certain things we can't prevent, and we can try really, really hard, but natural disasters being one, we can't prevent it. So what happens when one occurs? And even though it's a scope outside, right, there's certain things as it relates to training and others. And so you think about that, what the employee does is they interact and go through all these. But it's been interesting really to see the fire code, you know, be talked about here in major news publications right now because of that.
Yeah, you know, you bring up a good point in the regards to that training piece, and the fire code really, you know, the more and more the fire code grows. I was just joking about this with a friend of mine. You know, we're in one volume. I think that eventually we're going to see 2 volumes of this fire code. But it hits on so much more than just fire prevention. or fire related, but it's more of a life safety code too. And I think that, I know NFPA kind of has the market on the life safety code, but I do think that it does encompass more than just fire related responses. And I think that, that might be something to take a look at, but training is key. And another good example like this week, and I don't know if you saw this article or saw the video, but it was some exceptional video out in New York where there was a fire in like a 5th story apartment, and you see people trying to, they were climbing, I think it was an 18-year-old and a 13-year-old climbing out the window to try to get a hold of either it was guttering or a gas pipe or whatever. And they're trying to get away from it. And I think the fire occurred at 7:15, and it's just occupant training too. It's like, where do we go? How do we get out of here? And I think one person died, one's in the burn center, were there working smoke alarms? What other things were going on in there? I know that one of the articles I read said something about electric bikes, but who knows? I mean, there's a lot of other things it could be, but yeah, it was. But training, I agree with you. Training is key as we take a look at these things.
Yeah, how our occupants choose to use the building and live and operate, and some of it we think is second nature, but I think we all have some tainted views because we live this stuff, right? So, how many times do you go into a hotel that you've never been into? Do you count the doors to get to the next exit? How close is it? Does the door actually work? I mean, how often? Maybe that's where my fitness ties in. I tend to take the stairs more in the 3-story, 4-story Holiday Inns or whoever. But that training is it's something I don't think we can ever forget, because people, and how do you take it and help them work, right? So one of the things that I think is really important, like when you look at our inspectors and they're doing regular inspections at our restaurants, right? What are probably our highest likelihood of fires are in cooking environments in the commercial area, right? So let's talk about the training of those people. Is there actual training? Is it in a language they understand? And, as much as they're turning over, what are they supposed to do? And so, we've got fixed systems, we have special fire extinguishers, but it all comes back to that employee triggering something to make them work. And I think there's times I'd rather see our inspectors spend more time in that environment helping change behaviors, right, than writing an enforcement for a bad exit sign, right? I'm not saying that the bad exit sign doesn't need to be fixed, but there are some things that we really want to see move the needle in safety and occupancy.
Yeah, I always tell my inspectors that we're public educators. We're inspectors by, that's what's on your shirt, but you're really a public educator, and you need to spend the time to, no different than somebody going to a school and doing a presentation, but you should be doing a presentation to those folks that you're going out to inspect. And you highlighted something that I've been on countless commercial kitchen fires where they didn't even know where the pull station was, didn't even know what it was, or they'll pull it during a fire drill where it's just a drill and it'll dump the systems, but they have not really had the training to know what goes on, or it's behind boxes and they don't even know, or a new cook comes in, he moves everything around, and with it being a fixed system, now it's just some, but those are the hazards, right? Those are big hazards that you just need to spend more time in discussing it and communicating it and having that dialogue with those folks there and training them on that.
Yeah, for sure. And in part of, you had asked one of the original questions, what's something very memorable to me? And back when I was a young firefighter, I was doing some consulting at the time. And so I was around fixed systems more than probably most people and most firefighters. And anyways, we get dispatched to this fire in an incinerator. If you've ever been to an incinerator, they're ugly, they're big, and this fire is run up this chute, and they want us to go put it out. So nothing like staring at a 6-story building with a fire in an incinerator. I'm a young firefighter. They send us up there and they say, hey, there's hose up there. You're just going to use it. Well, in my head, I'm thinking it's this single jacketed hose with red nozzle, and that fire looks way bigger than you want me to do, right? And
right.
So I'm like, you sure we can't take our standpipe? Like, I'm good if we do. And this is even before there were the wristlets on the coats. And so I had to, it was such an intense fire. I was sitting there up against this chimney, putting this water in. I just remember my wrist being on fire, and the velocity of air movement coming out of that was almost taking the water that was and spraying it back. It was the most incredible thing. So, right, we give it a solid 1, and we go back, relay to the boss, the incident commander, that, hey, you need a 2.5 up there. This thing ain't going anywhere.
Need big water.
Yeah. Yep. But here's the thing. I don't blame that captain. Right? How many times do we as prevention folks or in the built environment from a building side, right? We put in an FM 200 system, we put in a carbon dioxide system, standpipes, sprinklers, and we never really work with the responding crews to understand how they work.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
We put in an FM 200 because they don't want water. And we don't tell them that it works in principle too because the container's closed, or pick the topic. And so I think that's been one of my huge passions, is how do we take this very complex code and get it not only to help our citizens and the people that occupy buildings, but our firefighters, because they're the ones integrating with these systems. And it's so easy, right? My inspectors are swamped, the crews are swamped, right? Just to get them there on a walk-in, or you catch one shift, you don't catch all 2, you don't get your paid on call, and whatever it is, right? I think we spend a lot of energy, and that training isn't just for our occupants, but man, our firefighters need it as well. Understanding, hey, this is a manual wet standpipe. What's that mean? Yeah. And what's it mean to them?
Yeah. Like you just said, having that crossover, like you got to build that crossover with the crews, just so that way they better understand it, like an FM 200 system, carbon dioxide system, things like that, where, hey, don't open the door. I mean, it's a fixed system. It's been designed to be able to suppress that fire. And, and I think that is one piece that I've tried to build on. I wish I need to do better with, and working with my staff, because I think it's important to break down that silo between both entities. Hey, that's a fire prevention thing, that's a fire suppression thing, and then we never talk about it. And so we've been doing a lot more of and really, me sitting in my office sending a memo is great, but that doesn't really help. I don't think that does a lot of good in the sense of really getting that carryover. And so really trying to break down those silos. So one of the things I try to build more rapport between my staff and operations, because as the department grows and you get 100, 200 firefighters, and you have 3 inspectors, you try to build that rapport. And I worked for the city of Colorado Springs for a bit, and I ran into a lot of folks really doing fire investigations more so than doing fire inspections, but also trying to communicate some of those fire inspection things. But a lot of times they're out running calls, and how do you get that crossover is always difficult. I've found, but it's definitely beneficial.
Yeah, well, you got to make them interested, right? They're good. Hey, we need you to come put some line on the ground. Oh, I'm in. Yeah. So one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about too is code development. So being the chair of the Fire Code, ICC Fire Code Action Committee, and with Pittsburgh just in our rearview mirror, and the public action, or the public comment hearings, I know that FCAC developed a lot of code proposals and brought them forward, and being at the code hearing, seeing some of the back and forth. I talked to Kevin McOsker a couple weeks ago, and he was mentioning how much he loves the code hearings because you can kind of see the why in the code, right? But as FCAC, as a group, I mean, there are many members to this committee. How do you develop a consensus, on those codes that you bring forward to, introduce to hopefully affect change in the fire code? That's a great question. There's no doubt you have to make sure you get the right people in the room when you start the discussions, right? There's times we get an idea that comes, I think the FCAC funnels a lot like anybody else, right? We have members on the committee, interested parties that bring ideas forward that maybe aren't well shaped. We've got some time. And so we set aside our work groups. And over the years, when we exclude a group or not include a group, even because their opinions might be different, that is where we see an issue going down the road with the success of that code proposal. And because quite honestly, it's either going to come up in a work group and we can work to address it, compromise, or we're going to take it to the code floor and the topic's going to come up, and we didn't address it because we thought we knew the answer. And so, consensus amongst the Fire Code Action Committee, right? We're intended to take on complex issues within the ICC co-development process within our scope. And there's some big ones and there's some very frustrating ones. And so just continually communicating has been big. I will say I love remote because I didn't have to travel in many regards, but I miss the conversations where you can read people's body language to see, as committee members, is this sinking in? Are you paying attention? Is there apprehension? Because, code talk can be tough. And there are some people involved in our process that I think get paid by the word they say, even at an FGAG meeting. And so sometimes you zone out. And so how do we make sure that it's making sense for us as probably advanced users of the fire code all the way down to our newest? And so I think that's been the biggest thing is, do we have the right people in the room? Do we understand what we're talking about? Is this addressed anywhere else? And if not, right, like, can we define that why? Can we define what are we doing here? Because sometimes you get in deep into something and you're like, why are we doing this? And nobody can answer. And there's a big pile on the floor somewhere of code changes we didn't move forward. But, I go back, there's a lot of people doing really good things. Yeah. And, I'll give you a good, for instance, we have a representative on the Fire Code Action Committee from the NAHB. And Gary's very involved in the overall code process. And I appreciate the input he gives us. He doesn't always vote in favor. He doesn't always like what we're doing. But you know what? He brings high value to the conversation. And there are things he brings up that we've got to address, we got to look into, got to discuss. But, that's part of the ICC process, right? We have a diverse committee. We have fire code officials. We have building side, we have engineers, we have interested parties, maybe from the alarm industry, the sprinkler industry, the fixed industry, right? So it's that focus. But if I'm telling you, every time we started to do something in a vacuum, if we thought we had it right, I guarantee you we're submitting a public comment because we didn't have it right.
Well, and you bring up a good point, a lot of perspective, right? Depending on who, what entity that you're representing and what perspective that you have on that given issue. And even that was kind of what, when I was talking to Kevin, he said, look, you think that you have the best thought out code proposal and you're going to take it forward. And then somebody, comes to the mic and says, but wait, what about this? And then it just totally destroys everything else. And I won't say it wholly falls apart, but it does, you have to take a step back and think about it again. And perspective is key. And I think that committees like the Fire Code Action Committee is, valuable. And like you mentioned, things get left on the cutting room floor. Like people come with ideas, but then at the end, you're like, hey, this is not workable. Or even if it is a workable idea, how do you get there? How do you get from the idea, the concept to the code? And sometimes it takes a little bit more extra effort as time goes on.
One time, I was on vacation when the submittals were due, and I think I was in the California time zone, and I'm communicating with Kevin because the close was at midnight California time. I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah. I almost missed the deadline here. I got a message. I was working with Robert Marshall on one. And he's like, hey, have you submitted that yet? And I was like, what do you mean? I have until like midnight tonight. And he's like, you have till 7:00 because of this time zone. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it right now. Cause it was like 6:58 or something like that. Yep. I've almost missed it, and he was panicked. He's like, look, we've worked really hard on this. You need to get this in. So
been there. Yeah.
But, so we talked about the code change process. I think you highlighted something really good. The dynamic of what we've kind of ran into with COVID, right? And virtual meetings and virtual platforms to be able to at least connect with more people. Like you and I, you're sitting in Michigan, I'm sitting in California, and being able to connect across the country is really cool. But also too, then you miss some of those, nonverbal cues that you're not going to be able to see maybe for people that are sitting up on the committee. And also too, as we talk about going to being in person and being able to talk in the back of the room and have conversations about code perspectives and, as things get presented, I think that, virtual meetings and virtual platforms are great, but then we kind of miss some of the, like what you were saying, some of those other things that also are very valuable to the overall code development process. So
I'm so glad we were back in person in Pittsburgh because, I remember my first code hearing. And if you think back, you look at this room, the committee is this, man, they're pulling stuff out, and the train of people that are going up to the microphone, and they have such well thought out things. I'm like, I thought I was a smart guy, and how did I miss that? How did I see it? But more importantly, when we're in person, you can help support. Like we had talked early in this conversation about how we need to bring people up. That's a continual conversation in the code development process. I'm young, and I've been in codes now in code development. I think 2003 was my first hearing. So I'm coming up to 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And it was really because somebody said, you got to go get involved in this. And I just showed up. And then luckily when I was in the room, somebody pointed me with what to do, because I didn't know.
Right.
And you just look at the layers and the complexity in the process. And I think that's where it's nice to be in the room. We wear our colors. You can go over to somebody and say, hey, you got a minute? Because I'm lost. And you hope nobody will ever say that. They don't want to get up. But even when I drag people from the state or the fire service, I say, hey, you got to get to these hearings. At least if I can get you to sit by us, you can be in the conversation. We can help guide you, help work a proposal with you. Because I think that's probably the whole other level that I love is, we've been doing some work on 104 in the fire code right now for Group B. We're working on some information sharing on the code changes we did on A2Ls or energy storage systems, distilleries. Marijuana's coming up a lot. But anyways, we're doing a lot to hopefully educate the fire service. But what we're trying to do is get newer fire marshals, fire inspectors, building officials in, so at least they're part of the discussion and they can start to hear this thing that we keep talking about called intent, right? Because when you start as a fire inspector, you sometimes think that code book's black and white, right? It says this, and I get it when it says a handrail height. Right. But when we're talking storage and complexity of fire lane issues and where we get our water from or any of those things, there's a lot of gray space in a fire code book. And if you haven't ever gone to a code hearing, you won't truly understand that. Now I get it. Now I see where there's some of this gray.
Yeah, well, and we always talk about the gray, and the code hearings really give you the why, right? Why did somebody come forward with a proposal? What is the situation that they're trying to address? And I reflected back on some conversations I've had with some folks, and one of the things now that things have gone virtual, like our ICC code books are all now you can get them through the premium access, right? One of the things that I would like to see, and I don't know if it'll ever happen or ever could happen, but is putting the public comment hearing dialogue to a code proposal that gets introduced into the code. So you can go back and you can it gives you a little bit of a commentary in a sense, because I love the code and commentary, but being able to watch those videos and have that dialogue, because I think that they record all those videos. It'd be cool to see that, that merged together, the code development process with the code book in the sense of being able to see that. And I don't know if Pfeiffer's listening to this, but maybe I can throw it out there. So.
I taught an old fire marshal that trick, that how to find this stuff. And he just called me. I'm so glad you said this, because he just called me like last week and said, so I was watching this film of Baltimore where they're talking about, I'm like, wow, nice job, man. Nice job.
Dove in head first. Like,
absolutely.
And there's only probably a handful of us that would probably really get a lot of enjoyment out of that. But that's amazing though, that he actually went back and found some, old video from Baltimore to be able to pull that up and review it. But yeah, hopefully we can, everything's digital now, right? It should be easy. And I say easy, I mean, I can operate my laptop. I can do I can run Facebook, but that's really primarily about it. Even though I got this big microphone, I think I YouTubed it. So, so we talked about the code development process, and one of the things that, right now we have a 3-year cycle, to be able to get things into the code. But we're starting, and you talked a little bit about the intent, identifying what that intent is. And we know that the code isn't always black and white. There's a lot of gray, and it also gives us the minimum performance requirements as it relates back to fire and life safety. But we're seeing so many things that get introduced to the code now that the code hasn't really addressed, or has they've addressed it, but maybe not on the scale. Amazon warehouses are a good example of some of the, those automated, storage systems. So, what's your thoughts on, like, I don't want to say shortening the code cycle, but maybe deviating it from, and maybe shortening is probably what I'm looking at, to maybe address these things. I think the concern that I would have is that you don't really get to vet a lot of these things before they, would be introduced to the code. So you may not get some well thought out things being introduced and eventually adopted.
Well, I watch the challenges that probably our code officials are going to have with electrical vehicle charging probably in the next 4 years, 3 years. Mm-hmm. You think about the amount of stored energy potential that could be in a 4-story parking deck now. Yep. And we've just started to have those discussions, I think, within the ICC process. I wish we were more agile. I don't know how there's times I'm okay with how long the process takes, because I think it forces us to be more meticulous. Mm-hmm. I think it forces us to propose better changes, knowing we've got this shot. And if we don't, it's hard to get back. I know that the ICC and their long-term code development committee has been working, and I'm sure there's going to be some changes coming down the road. In the ICC process in how they structure their Group A, Group B. I think you're going to see changes, and I'm hoping that those changes allow us some better flexibility, because Michigan, we're still in the 2015 IBC.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that means we're using the 2013 72 and NFPA 13. Mm-hmm. As a code user, I'm dipping into all of them, and I know what we've added. But I have this call all the time, right? Our code doesn't address this. Well, right. Trust me, grab the 2021. It's in there. You want to use the 2021 language on this. Well, how do I do that? And so, we're dealing out. Metro Detroit is booming in batteries right now, right? Yeah. And it's really not till the 2024 that we have maybe started to scratch the surface in battery storage, in battery production facilities, and we're just scratching the surface, right? Specifically for lithium ion or any of the lithium style batteries. And it's been very interesting, because I think we all want safe environments, and I think the roadmap is there in the 2024 code. Well, if you're not a strong HJ and you start to get pushback from the design professional, in fact, one just happened the other day. They said, well, that's not code. We're not going to follow it. I'm like, this is about safety of your occupants. This is what the national standard is going to. The code is very quiet. The 2015 fire code did not have the purview of batteries. Didn't even probably forecast it, right? Because all this stuff is like Tesla wall systems and those types of things. Like, those things have just, like, I put solar on my house and I have a backup battery. I'm imagining the 2015 thought about solar, but maybe not the backup battery capacity. Not to what we've learned now. I mean, what have we learned now just in the off gassing and when we put things in containers and what happens? And I think that's where I really see. I wish we were agile. But I think in many ways this is why we need a lot of people involved in codes, because that perspective, right? there was major frustration when we put extraction in the fire code because people thought it was a Colorado, Washington, Oregon thing. And look at how many states now have adopted some form of recreational drug use in which it's now affecting this with major operations. And so I think, I think there's times, right, that's why we need the perspective of so many. We need good quality codes to be submitted. We need those ideas. If people have an idea, but they're like, I don't know how to work the system, man, look up the Fire Code Action Committee list, talk to somebody and say, hey, how do we start working? Because right, our next chance to work on a fire code is the 2027 edition. Wow. Think about that.
Holy smokes! Yeah, and it's all we're approaching 2022, and like you just mentioned, we're just scratching the surface on batteries. And I even heard this. What was it? I think on Wednesday they've even tried to. There's even new technology coming out. And they think in 18 months there will be a new battery technology that's coming out with that's they're not going to use lithium paste, but they're going to use something. It's still a lithium, solid lithium. And so, okay, well, let's see. They say it's safer, but who knows? I mean, and if we're only scratching the surface, and those things won't get changed till 2027, but they'll be using them, right? So how do we address that?
Well, and you think, let's go back to that initial discussion we had, right? Okay. So we have an emerging technology, and let's just take batteries off the table. I don't care what it is. Go back to those basic principles of what our codes are trying to do, right? Yeah. Limit an event from starting. That's step one, right? And then if one does, how do we keep it small, and how do we get our occupants out, right? Whether that's detection, alerting, fire protection, separation, right? It goes back. We're going to be challenged as code officials continually with emerging technology. The rate at which technology is emerging in the United States right now is unheard of. Yeah. And it's going to continue. And I think that's the part that us as code officials, the code doesn't necessarily say no to technology. Right. But what it does say is, hey, look, there's these core principles. There's this intent of the code and the scope of the code. And we need to make sure that people are staying safe in the built environment.
Yeah, and I like where you talked about making sure that things that at least the code development process is a little bit more agile, because it does need to be. I heard somebody give an example of how technology is increasing exponentially. I mean, we're just seeing it. Every month we see something new, anywhere from even robots, right? Boston Dynamics and some of the technology that they're doing. But you compare that with maybe the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution took decades for different machines to come online to be able to help us build those processes. We don't necessarily have that amount of time anymore, right? Things are just coming at us such a fast pace that we have to, understand it. And I like what you were saying about making sure, just going back to the core principles of what we do in, fire and life safety inspections, and taking a look at that, and how do we, making sure that that's really our underlying foundation, building that good foundation and working from that.
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about that. So in this, era of, code development and, the processes that we're seeing, but we've also had to be very responsive to this pandemic, right? There's been a lot of things, anywhere from virtual inspections to plan reviews, digital plan reviews that we've seen. What are some of those changes that you got your departments implemented in response to the pandemic, and what are some of those things that you think that we may see long term as we continue, down this path?
I love electronic plan review. If you follow me on Twitter, I posted a picture of me doing a plan review on an iPad. And I can do most of my plan reviews. I use a program called PDF Expert. It's got a measuring tool like Cloud. Everybody has their favorite. And I just find the usability quite solid. Now, not everybody's bought into electronic plan review. But I can tell you more and more construction sites, more and more places, right? That iPad or tablet in somebody's hand. Specifically, I love watching these big macho construction guys with tablets building masonry walls and trying to see where openings are. So there's no doubt that I think some advanced flexibility in certain things I think we're seeing in the profession. I thought, I think one of the things that we're challenged with where did we ever get to the 180 days of a temporary structure? And, our crews had to go out and reissue some temporary permits for temporary structures because the temporary tents are still up. And, they started in over a year ago. And so I hope, right, that we found better ways to communicate, to have meetings virtually for flexibility, right? And there's also this, hey, I'm stuck. Can we do a virtual inspection real quick, even though it might not be the best? But no doubt, I think that digitalized, it forced the hand of many of us to finally get in a much faster environment. So, faster plan reviews is a big thing, right? And mailing and FedEx and all those things of big tubes of drawings gone, because we can now highlight something, say, fix this, have that tenacity in that plan review, send it back to me so I can see it, and we're good. But that's probably, in some ways, I thought our crews did awesome. Our inspectors did fantastic, but, we really haven't stuck much with electronic inspections. They're back in the field full bore, but the digital plan review and all those are definitely things we did in like 6 months. We were talking like it was going to take us years to do.
Yeah, definitely there was, it thrust a lot of us. We were doing electronic plan review, and we're still accepting paper plans, but come, I want to say it was March 17th, 2020, 2019? I can't remember anymore. It seems like it's been a while. But we virtually closed our doors and said, all right, everything, email things to this email address, and we'll go from there. Because they had CAD files, and we could start looking at it from there. One of the things that I'd like to kind of help with my inspection staff is being able to get those plans, those digital plans, because there's got to be a way, and getting them to their iPads. We've been having struggles with that, trying to figure out the best, data sharing methods, because there are such big files. And so how do you best accommodate that? And hopefully we can get there. Hopefully the transition goes a little bit more smoothly. So, one of the things I took your course on at the CFPI. It's the California Fire Prevention Institute, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about training, because I know that you're also going to be teaching another class. It's part 2, right, of that course, and I know that a lot of my California friends have gleaned a lot of information. You helped me anywhere from having one-on-ones with my staff, and identifying the importance of that. And I will tell you that that's really helped me develop a much bigger and greater rapport with all my direct reports, people that, and I feel like I have a better pulse on the organization. I feel like I know that if somebody asks me a question, I have a better answer. And then also, I've also improved my note taking a bit. So, I will say that I was trying to do it in a written journal, and I said, I don't think written is quite the answer, because I remember I had called somebody and documented the conversation. I wrote it down. Then I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it in my journal. And I flipped through that thing for like at least 45 minutes trying to find the conversation. And now I just, it's on my iPad. I can search it and boom, there it is. And say, hey, yeah, we talked about it on this day and this is the outcome. And so we talk about that. And so, and I think that class immensely helped me, but I know other people as well. So as we're looking at new and existing code officials, what recommendations do you have in the, and I know this is kind of a very broad question as I'm looking at how I wrote it, but necessary leadership skills to engage and motivate your staff. To be able to, because we're all experiencing the stress as it relates back to COVID, right? And the continued pandemic. And we talk about mental health. And I think that that's one of those things that gets, I want to say, at least what I've seen in a lot of organizations doesn't really get recognized as the mental health of our code professionals as well. And so then how do we address that? How do we keep them engaged and really continue to try to motivate them?
I'd like to think that everybody's 100% happy and ready for the holiday season. And what I've noticed is people are just as stressed right now as, like, usually now it's a downtime for people, and it's not. But, I think having some compassion and realizing our humans work for us and they're challenged, right? They're challenged at home. They're challenged with a spouse. we'd like to think we give everybody great working conditions, but many times there isn't that avenue to find that out. But let's just take the stress outside of work away. But one of the things I think that you're talking about is, as leaders, one of our job is to keep people motivated. In motivation, everybody has these phrases, right? But when I'm looking at new leaders, when I'm looking at new inspectors, I think it's so easy for them to get buried. This thing's hard, right? Like, give a code book to a new fire inspector and say, tell me where the code says I can put a Knox box in, and see how long they can answer that question. Because I just completely screwed with them because I referred to a vendor name versus what's in the code. Right. And they're going to flip and they're going to turn. Not find
Knox.
Yeah. And so I think so much is just how do we give them that support and give them that direction, because we want them to be successful, right? A new fire code official coming to meet with maybe me or something, I'll say, hey, look, I want to see you come in with your thought process, but you don't have to have it answered, and then I'll help you walk through the code, right? And by the time, a year or 2 or 3 goes on, I want to hear it way different than what I do on the first. I want to see how they got there. So, I think for our new bosses specifically that are overseeing, have that compassion, but you gotta set aside time, even with inspectors, to sit there and talk to them about what's going on in their life, how they're enjoying their job, what they're frustrated with, and what your role is to support them, and just even asking them, hey, how can I help? Yeah. And then there's times you got to challenge them, right? Let's take somebody who's been doing fire inspection for 2-3 years. They got their basic training done. They're rocking and rolling. Okay, well, now how do I make them prepared? Are they out at our state fire inspector meetings or local meetings? Have they talked to the fire marshal next door? Are they finding opportunities to go have lunch or coffee? Or are they just too busy? Does their computer do what their computer needs them to do? And I think just having that open dialogue and conversation, as a leader, I think so many times it's like, well, I don't want to micromanage them. I want to let them do their job. And I'm not saying you need to micromanage, but employees, when they know that they've got to come to you and tell you that, hey, this is where this project is, or this is the things I'm struggling with on this project, it's just going to help us relieve some of that stress, some of those preventable things. And I'd be remiss if I didn't tell every code official, you got to work out. Like, this job is stupid stress. Like, nothing like you think a project's going well and you took an extra day in a plan review and they called the mayor's office, and then the mayor's office is calling you because, whatever. And it's just unneeded stress sometimes. And there's a lot riding. You ever miss something on a $10 million bill and it costs somebody some money? That's a hard, right? How do you stay true and still get things done? And so I think there's times that we as leaders have to just keep having that conversation with our peers, with our neighbors, with our fire inspectors, with our building officials, and saying, hey, look, all right, what's your concerns on this building? What's your concerns on this process? Let's talk through this. And are we covered?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that stress, if you ever miss anything and then you have to go back and address that stress or address that topic, and then that causes additional stress and, policymakers get involved. And so I will say, as you mentioned, working out, that is a good stress relief. I think that so many people don't realize how important it truly is. Meditation, I also try to meditate quite a bit. I'm on again, off again with the practice. I wish I would stay because I feel more. I do feel a little bit more grounded when I meditate a little bit more frequently. There's different apps, from the Calm app to Headspace and all those things. But as you talked about, engaging your staff and having those conversations, and some staff may not want to share what's going on in their lives, but I will say that it has helped me as their supervisor to have these conversations. I've learned more about them and what's going on in their lives and some of the stresses that they have just outside the organization. And, and offering, if there's employment assistance programs that I can help offer them, to be able to address some of those things. I think that's kind of, being empathetic, being compassionate, and that doesn't just go for the people that we go out and inspect, but also our staff, and understanding that as well. I think that is key. So,
yeah, just keep talking or listening.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, listening to their frustrations. And I think you mentioned in that training, you give them, you have 30-minute windows, and the first 10 minutes is for them. The next 10 minutes is for you. And then at the end, you come together and, see what we can do to help. So absolutely.
It's been amazing. Like some people are like, my computer's not working, and right. So they're stressed. And you're like, dude, you've had a computer for 4 years. I can solve that one. That one's easy, right? Like, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish it was always that easy, though, right? Sometimes they aren't always that easy. I wish that Staples commercial where you can hit that easy button. It's not always that easy, unfortunately. But
yeah.
So as we kind of come, I really appreciate you've taken well over an hour of your time, and I want to ask you one more question as we start to come to a close. But and it's maybe it's a kind of a big topic or a big conversation, but what, as a fire code official, what do you think our most important role is to be able to help facilitate change within our communities, within our departments, and those types of things?
I think when you think of the design building process, let's just start there. We got buildings coming in. I want our people to be so approachable that the designers are coming to our staff before they hit the planners up.
Yeah.
And the planners hate when I say that. But if we can get our fire hydrants in the ground and the access doors that we need and the pavement we need before they start drawing trees and counting trees, we're way better.
Yep.
But you got to build those relationships up. One of the hardest parts as a fire authority is we're a third leg to. We have 3 planners. We have 3 code of right. Every single one of our communities has somebody different, and so that pressure's there on me as the fire chief. That pressure's there on the fire marshal and inspectors to build those relationships up, because there's gonna be pushback on our fire stuff. And I'm not saying, how hard it is to make 100% fire safe community, and we want, right? We want fire hydrants. We want safe buildings, and you might as well make them all out of type 1 construction, but we know that's not going to happen. And so
it's got to be aesthetically pleasing, right? Like you just talked about the planters and the trees, and then how do we mitigate landscaping versus fire safety? Because it's this dynamic, this back and forth as well. I mean, it's a balance, right?
And I push if I get one of my electeds calls me about something that one of our inspectors is on, I try to involve them in the conversation so they're building up a relationship. One of the things I tell my inspectors all the time, there's going to be a time where you get pushed over the edge. I hope you don't, but somebody, preferably not somebody a community partner that we work with, but somebody that is, they push them. And I said, I need to be your first call because I know who my next call is going to be, and we can get ahead of it. We can be okay. And that's where those relationships come in. When there's value to when we have them, because then we can continue to keep doing what our mission is. Just look at how complicated, I don't know in California, but we have to update our ordinances from time to time. In updating ordinances, I need those relationships because our planners have better relationships with their electeds than I do. And whether it's planners, building official, water purveyors, whatever it is, it's just always continuing to have those discussions, because when we can keep talking, it goes back to that code development process. That collaboration is big, because we can give and take on some things to help them give and take on some things. And many times we're in line. It's just a matter of what pressures. And so that's what I would say is, hey, you want to make change in your community, you got to keep talking. And there's no difference when we have to go talk with business owners. And how do we build that relationship up when we need it ahead of time? And so I think within our community, that's one aspect. You want to know the biggest way that we made an impact in our community is our goal is to try to make sure we're putting smoke alarms or checked every smoke alarm in every residential unit in our jurisdiction. That is a monumental task. We're plus 10 years in. We haven't made it yet. We've installed over 100,000 devices.
Wow.
But I'll tell you what, if you want to get to your public, you got to go find them at their houses.
Yeah.
And we've made great strides. We've saved lives. We've saved property. We've been able to do some pretty monumental things. And it's going to be something that, we're going to keep doing every day. And our crews do a wonderful job getting on it. But I think that has made more change probably in our community and our public interaction is go knock on a door, say, hey, I'm Mike from the fire department. Can we check your smoke alarms? When we do them around when there's a fire, we do them on special events. Yeah. So really when we probably mash all that up, that's how we've made a pretty big impact on our community over time.
Yeah, I think that you can kind of boil that all down, like you just mentioned, relationships. How do you build relationships with not only, all the stakeholders, internal and external, and, building those relationships, because that's going to help go a long way in the overall success and, health of an organization.
In February, we'll do our annual soup out. So I try to get as many firefighters and staff to make a soup, chili soup, whatever. It's not a competition. We roll the fire trucks outside and we invite anybody that our staff has relationships with and say, come on over, have some soup. You got to eat lunch.
Right.
And it has been probably one of the coolest things over the years. We'll have fire truck repair people, DOT people, or road commission style people, our community leaders, building occupants, building owners. We can have, if we don't make 20 pots of soup, we're not going to have enough. It's cool.
So I guess, do you make the soup, or does everybody bring a soup? Is it like a potluck almost?
No, we ask our staff. Now we do get some friends that do want to make a pot and they want to bring it, but it is our firefighters, our inspectors, our admin staff. Yeah, it's been going on. A chief came to us in the 80s from the city of Detroit, and he brought that over as a way of saying thank you to the people that really support us. But it is amazing how simple that is. Just right. We have these beautiful bays.
Yeah. Yep.
Pull the fire trucks out. We didn't do it.
Yep.
We haven't done it for 2 years now. So we're looking to hopefully, knock on wood, we're hopefully going to have in February. And it's just you got to eat. Everybody likes homemade soup.
Yeah, they do. Especially in Michigan in February. Right? Yeah. It'd be nice and toasty, I'm sure. That's all right though. Get everybody together. You can stand on the app bay a little bit and have a little bit of, open discussion and dialogue and enjoy some soup. I think that's a great idea. We do like a pancake breakfast. It's through our Tracy or through our firefighters foundation. But I do like the idea of at least also including maybe anybody that you touch, right? And trying to have that open dialogue and just continue to build that relationship a little bit more. So, well, Chief, I really appreciate it. So before we end, is there anything like last parting words that you want to leave our ICC Region 1 audience with as the episode comes to a close? Over the years, I appreciate all the friendships that I made and all the communications that we do get from Region 1 in co-development, whether it's been FCAC or just proposals we've worked on. I wholeheartedly, that region does really good things that have made really substantial changes. And I know I personally, professionally appreciate it. I know March, I'm looking forward to coming out to CFPI and being a part of the program there and seeing that. So, really so grateful for the relationships, but, I'm thankful for everybody who takes time to listen to this because they're the true heroes making a difference every day. And I think sometimes all of us, it's hard to remember right now that the work we're doing today is making a difference. Our inspectors holding people to meet standards, our inspectors catching issues, educating, any of those things are making a difference. And it's so hard some days to remember that you're making a difference. Right. And as I dub, right, we're saving future lives. And I'm just so grateful for people that are listening to this, that continue to do that work every day. All right. Thanks, Chief. I really appreciate it. Well, everyone, that brings this episode, unfortunately, to a close. I'm sure I could probably talk to Chief O'Brien probably at least another 2 hours, but you'll probably get tired of listening to me. But I'm sure you'll enjoy more of his wisdom. But thanks to Chief O'Brien for joining us. I really do appreciate it. We hope that this insight and the experiences that he shared is really will help you long term. As always, thanks for watching or listening, kind of depending where you're at. But if you enjoyed the show, please, make sure to rate us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all those things. We always definitely appreciate that. And if you want to be a guest in an upcoming episode, I'm always looking for to interview more people. So again, thank you for listening.